Western and Arab countries are ramping up the pressure to get a UN resolution passed against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Since the beginning of the uprising 10 months ago, the UN has failed to reach any common ground on a crisis that has killed more than 5,400 people. Well, today at the Security Council, the head of the Arab League will call on the international community to rally against the regime. Hillary Clinton, French Foreign Affairs Minister Alain Juppé, and British Foreign Affairs Minister William Hague will be there to back the motion. But nothing can happen if Russia doesn't budge, and Moscow continues to stand by Damascus. Is the UN powerless to change the course of events in Syria? I'll be putting that question to my guests this evening. We have with us Monzer Makous, member of the Syrian National Council and coordinator for relations with Europe. Monzer is with us on set for just a few minutes because you will be taken away by, you have pressing matters to attend to with respect to the organization of the National Council. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Anton Kozlov is to my right. You're an associate professor at the American Graduate School. Thanks for being here. And we also have from London, Jonathan Paris, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council of the United States, who will be with us in just a few minutes. And from New York, Jeffrey Laurenti, senior fellow as well at the Century Foundation. Jeffrey Laurenti has worked a lot on multilateral, the efforts of multilateral institutions such as the United Nations. The first question I want to ask, though, goes to our reporter at the UN in New York, Guillaume Meyer. Our correspondent is standing by. Guillaume, can you just give us an update on who's going to be speaking today? What's going to happen?
Well, the meeting will be taking place just a few steps away from the studio where I'm standing right now. And the meeting will be taking place with the Security Council. And you have representatives from the Arab League. The Secretary General of the Arab League will be present to basically introduce the findings of their mission in Syria. And the idea for the Arab League is to present a case for what needs to be done and what inspired the draft resolution of the United Nations that is currently being studied by the Security Council. So you will have members of the Security Council, of course, listening to representatives of the Arab League. And among the people listening, you have three very important characters. You have Hillary Clinton from the United States, William Hague, the Foreign Affairs Minister from the UK, and also Alain Juppé, of course, the French Foreign Minister. All of them present to show support for the process that's being put forward by the United Nations and the Arab League. The international community really standing by the Arab League and using, if you will, the protection of the Arab League to put this new project forward and try to convince the Russians that the way forward is the UN resolution that is currently being drafted.
So Western countries really throwing their weight behind this draft resolution. Monzer Makous, you're a member of the Syrian National Council. What are you expecting from today's meeting at the United Nations?
In fact, we don't expect too much from it today, but things are changing now. We can demonstrate that all people know that today the situation is changed because the Arab involvement is getting more advanced. And also there is some changes on the ground. The Syrian Free Army is getting more powerful. And this is a new player on the ground. The other thing is that the revolution in Syria is getting also more powerful. And despite the very dangerous repression from the regime, there is a big determination, and the revolution will never get back. So these three factors which are very important to change things now on the ground.
One of the three factors you mentioned was increased Arab involvement. And it's true that the project resolution, the draft resolution that's going to be presented to the Security Council is largely based on the Arab League initiative. In fact, it's being presented by an Arab country, by Morocco. Is this a positive development as far as you're concerned?
Yes, it is a positive for two main reasons. The first one is European and the West position was to a high degree, let us say, depending on the Arab position. And they were repeating it all the time when we were in contact with them, that they could not do anything before the Arab countries take some hard position. Now the Arab position is so advanced that I think Western states have to follow them now. The other thing is...
And Western states are following them, but what we want to know from you before you leave is, what's that going to change? Because if Russia still opposes a veto, then the draft resolution can't pass. So how does it help you that Arab countries are getting involved?
The other thing also for the Russian position. We know that Russia is still supporting the Syrian regime. Today, if in the past they were dealing with two parties, the Syrian revolution and the regime, and they were unconditionally supporting the regime. Today, Arabs could not, the Russians could not neglect the Arab situation because they have too much, let's say, strategic interest in the Arab world, particularly in the Gulf world. We know Gulf countries are very important for Russia, and Russians could no more neglect their position. That's why we hope that the Russian position would be slightly softened. Today, even today, if we follow the Russian declaration, we see that slightly different from it was a few days ago. Is this because the Arab involvement is getting harder and harder?
All right, Monzar Marcus, thank you very, very much for joining us on the set of the France 24 debate. Now, I'd like to listen to an interview with Burhan Halioun, who is the head of the Syrian National Council. And he was a little bit more positive when he explained what he was expecting from the UN meeting today.
We have come to the UN to seek the support of the Security Council in preventing the country from becoming a failed state. The Syrian National Council appeals to the United Nations and calls on the Security Council to bear its full responsibility and vote on a definitive resolution condemning the crimes against humanity and recognizing the ineptitude of Bashar al-Assad as president and asking him to step down.
All right, I'd like to go now to London and speak with Jonathan Paris, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council of the United States. Jonathan, what difference does it make that Morocco is presenting this draft resolution? And just to remind our viewers, a resolution was already presented in October. Russians vetoed that resolution. One of the differences with what's going on today is that there's a different face to this initiative.
Well, I think having Morocco is an excellent choice for a presenter. They are a moderate Arab country. They have not been vociferously involved in this issue in the past 10 months. They are on the Security Council right now, so they legally can do this. And, I think they would be the right country to try to get a compromise between the Russian position, which, as I understand it, is veto, 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 and the Arab League position, which is, to my mind, quite constructive, trying to ease out Assad to prevent a civil war.
Anton Kozlov, is the Russian position, as Jonathan Paris just summed it up, veto, veto, veto?
Well, I think Russians will veto definitely if they find the resolution unacceptable to their interest.
What are the red lines for the Russians?
Well, look, I mean, I think they have a very good example of the Libyan situation and the resolution on Libya, and they certainly do not want to have the same situation in Syria. And in Syria, they do have interest. They had interest in Libya as well, and they lost a lot. Now, they do have military installations in Libya. They do have a long history of bilateral relations, so on and so forth. So they definitely will try to do everything in order to prevent the Libyan scenario. And I think that rightly so.
But they feel they were trapped. They feel they were wronged or shortchanged with the UN Security Council resolution that allowed military intervention in Libya?
Of course, the resolution on Libya was interpreted very creatively by NATO, and that's the Russian view. And they certainly do not want to have the repetition of the same scenario in Syria. Of course. In fact, they felt that they were kind of, slapped in the face. And in fact, we did see a divergence of views between Putin and Medvedev on the Libyan.
The Russian president and prime minister.
Exactly, which I think did a great damage to Medvedev, who in fact, in many ways, endorsed the Western intervention, whereas Putin was very much against. Today, the situation had changed.
Jeffrey Laurenti in New York, as far as you see it, is there any way that the international community can reach some kind of agreement?
Well, if the agreement is expected to be about a call for Assad to step down, no, there won't be any agreement, because the Russians, and not just the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, now the Pakistanis are on the council as well, they all have a strong interest in not supporting the notion that the Security Council can order the removal of leaders of countries. When the Russians hear from the Syrian National Council that we're not going to negotiate a political settlement until Assad leaves, they hear a replay of the same tape that they had heard from the Libyan Transitional Council in the summer of 2011, and they don't want to see it happen again. So if the starting point is the removal of Assad, you're not going to get a Security Council consensus. And the Russians are going to be the leaders on this. The Russians don't have very much kind of long-term perspective. If they certainly have a long-term investment of many decades in the Assad family's control of Syria. But the Americans had an equally, in fact, deeper long-term investment in Mubarak. And when Mubarak began to lose his grip, the Americans under Obama quickly signaled, go with the future. The Russians still seem trapped a bit in looking back to the past, and they're certainly not going to change their views this afternoon.
Guillaume Meyer, our reporter at the United Nations, what is actually in this draft resolution? What is Morocco pushing to achieve?
Well, first of all, of course, you have a call to end the violence in Syria, and it seems natural, but of course, it's a very important part of this resolution. The other important, significant aspect of the resolution is that there is a call for Assad to step aside, if you will. Instead of stepping down, he's being called to transfer the power to his deputy, so to the vice president of Syria, and to organize elections in the near future. So it's a way, if you will, a wording that the UN has been able to find to sort of make it easier for the Russians to side with that resolution, because if they were to even just abstain from voting, they would not be in any way calling for the ouster of Bashar al-Assad or asking him to step down. That being said, a lot of people here simply say that stepping aside, stepping down, you're just playing with words, and in the end, what the international community is pushing for is for Bashar al-Assad to leave office, period.
But we've just heard from Anton Kozlov and Jeffrey Laurenti, both saying that this cannot pass. But the French press this morning reported that the French Foreign Affairs Minister Alain Juppé had got some guarantees, without making it clear what kind of guarantees, from purportedly from the Russian side. What are the noises you're hearing in the corridors of the United Nations?
Well, to be honest, when you're coming for a big meeting like that in New York, you have to sort of build up the momentum and say, look, something is going to happen. We're working hard, and we think that there is a resolution that can be voted on within the next few days. That's what's being said officially. Now, behind the scenes, I can tell you that here at the United Nations, there is not much enthusiasm right now. And a lot of people are saying that there is a lot of work to be done in the next few hours, even in the next few days, if you want a vote to happen, say, by the end of the week. So a lot of skepticism, if you will, here at the United Nations on whether or not there could be a vote in the next few days. And what we are hearing is that the Russians are making it extremely hard in the last stretch of these negotiations. They are not giving up on anything, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
We're going to listen now to what Susan Rice had to say. Susan Rice is the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and she was essentially explaining that there really is nothing for the Russians to object to in this draft resolution.
We think that what is contained in this resolution is quite straightforward. There are no sanctions. There is no use of force or threat of the use of force, as some have alleged. It is primarily a straightforward condemnation of what has transpired, a call upon the government of Syria to adhere to the commitments it made to the Arab League, and an endorsement of the Arab League plan.
Anton Kozlov, when you hear what Susan Rice just said, what are the impediments to Russia accepting this resolution? It doesn't have any binding force. It's not sanctioning use of force.
It's the condemnation of Assad as the sole perpetrators of violence. I think the Russians do object to that vision because they consider that violence had been perpetrated
by both sides.
Exactly.
The opposition supporters and the Assad regime.
Which basically corresponds to the situation on the ground. And whereas, in fact, in mainstream media, we see only Assad and his security forces being responsible. I think we have to take into consideration that we do have, well, you can say low-intensity civil war going on there. We do have
low intensity, upwards of 5,000 people have been killed so far.
Well, look, I mean, when this 5,000 number is brought up, I would say in the past 10 years, there were 2 million people killed in a civil war in Zaire. Do we hear about that on television? Not that often. So I think we do have a certain accent put on this situation in Syria, which is legitimate, and I certainly do not try to legitimize the use of violence. What I'm saying is that there's a disproportionate reporting and disproportionate emphasis on certain things.
I think the West is really putting the spotlight disproportionately on what's going on in Syria?
We've been having wars and conflicts in Africa for the past, I don't know how many decades. What do we hear about that? Not much. The same thing goes for South America. I mean, we do have conflicts in the world. So I think in this particular case, it's the same thing as we heard so much about the possibility of Gaddafi troops massacring people in Benghazi as a justification of the NATO intervention. I think we do have a lot of politically motivated hype in this particular case.
Well, French Foreign Affairs Minister Alain Juppé says what's happening in Syria is scandalous. He's going to be at the United Nations Security Council to back the draft resolution. We're going to have a short break right now, but join us after the news flash for the second part of the France 24 debate.